alternative do you have?
Not many.
Too funny.
Sorry, we couldn't get together in person.
I'll figure out how
That would have been nice.
Well, we have to wear masks if we do that, so
I know.
we won't recognize one another.
I know you see people in the store and you go, oh, I do know you, don't I?
Every time Zell coughs, I back up a little bit.
It's this heavy duty tea that I'm drinking. That's the problem.
Actually, we had thought to have a meeting on the back porch of, or front porch, depending on how you count it, of the Ram Island Yacht Club, which is quite breezy, and we could easily maintain our 6-foot separation. The problem is the bandwidth of the Wi-Fi system, because we're required to be public, and so we have to have all of us on. So 5 computers on the bandwidth would fry it, I think. 5 or 6. I suppose if we had one and we all sat back some distance from it, but then we'd have to be heard.
That's right. ...
So there's a technical challenge in the whole thing.
We'll figure it out.
I think we shall, because this sucks. Excuse me.
Are you guys expecting anybody else?
Yes, we're expecting Victor and
Okay.
I think probably Maggie, although I haven't heard from her.
We hear that she's alive
Okay.
because we keep seeing her name in
Yes.
the day as she's kayaking. So
Well, in fact, I rode by her walking on Groton Long Point on my bicycle. I said hi, and she gave me a look like, who are you?
who are you? Were you masked?
I know I was helmeted, though.
Well, Frank always recognizes me because of my helmet.
That's right.
Circa,
Or is it Mickey?
well, my bike helmet is circa 1960 something.
Oh, really? Oh, wow. What does those look like?
Looks
It's
like
one of those old Bell helmets.
Like a salad bowl. You gotta get one of those fancy, whatever it is, technology that they have in ski helmets and bike helmets is supposed to protect your brain from traumatic injury.
Right. We read that.
MIPS, Motion Integrated Protection System.
Yeah.
Well, the funny thing is, down in Mexico, we only have a bike. We don't have a car down there, so we bike everywhere. No one, including us, wears helmets. And I decided that that's because probably my brain is not as valuable in Mexico as it is here. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Could be.
So everybody hanging in there?
Mhm.
Hanging in.
It's pretty wild.
What else can you do?
I don't know, but man.
I mean, it's old world technology. It goes back to 1900. What don't we understand? Keep people apart, wear masks, wash your hands.
Yeah.
Things you learned in kindergarten.
Yeah.
When did you go to kindergarten, Sarah?
Wasn't that a book?
Yeah, that's right. The gold.
think it's a book. Sure.
Yep, it was. Everything I learned in life, I learned in kindergarten.
That's right.
I'm going to ring up Frank.
No, you're not.
Sorry.
Frank,
Victor.
You're not Frank.
Right,
Vic-
Frank. We got Frank.
The other Frank.
Yeah.
The Vicar Frank.
that looks like Frank, but isn't
Right.
Frank.
Sorry.
So Frank, did you guys do a lot of sailing?
Not a lot, but we've been out around here, the block and Long Island and putzing around. Have you been to Maine?
Yeah, we went to Maine for 2 weeks.
Well, I got to Nantucket, so that was a.
Oh, that's great.
I was out for 12 days.
Oh boy,
in
were you
Canada.
there when they had a COVID outbreak 2 weeks ago?
No, we got back a week ago. So it
Nantucket did?
was in tandem with Victor and Eugenia, actually, and a woman from my sail club. So we did all of that. But the most horrific part was coming back from Cutty Hunt to Block with the wind on our nose and the tide against us, 9 hours. It was not fun.
Oh my God.
Not smart.
The old Buzzards Bay washing machine.
Yeah, you ought to know better than that one.
Day. It was Block Island Sound, and it was just like, oh, you got to be kidding me. Anyway, other than that, it was great. A lot of fog in Nantucket, but
That's called a layover day.
That's it. You
well, we
got it.
spent 3 nights in Edgartown because of wind and rain and stuff, but not a bad place to be holed up.
That's a nice harbor to be in.
It is.
Lots of osprey. Very
Yeah.
pretty.
It's great. So we had a good time, other than that 1 9-hour day from Cutty Hunt to Block.
Okay, I just called Victor and no one answered the phone. So why don't we just get started? And if he joins us, that would be great.
Okay.
Is that agreed?
Sure.
Okay.
Yes.
Got to find my here it is. Okay, so a call to order. We've got everybody on board except Victor and Maggie. Meeting is called to order at 5:07. And so the first thing is to approve the minutes that were again sent out this afternoon from our secretary, Jesse. And
They are not correct. They are not correct. Victor was in attendance and I did not include him. So we were
okay,
correct.
so shall we amend it then?
Yep, plus Victor.
Okay, any other comments?
As he said, I spoke and I was quoted, but I wasn't in attendance.
Okay,
I can hear him saying that. That's great.
okay, do we have a motion to accept the minutes as revised?
Somebody else make it.
So
Oh,
moved.
yes. So
Come on, you guys do this all the time. Come on, Sarah and Frank, just do it.
I heard Mickey. I'll second Mickey.
Nikki
Okay.
moved and Frank seconded.
Okay,
Thank you.
all
Mickey.
those in favor?
All right.
Hi.
Anybody abstaining or objecting? Okay, minutes approved. It looks like we have no one joining us from the public that has signed up, and I see no one on the screen that might be out there. So why don't we just start
Ken is joining us briefly as Mr. Public, but then he's leaving.
It's a Zoom bomb.
Yeah.
Get the dog. Take care, guys.
Bye, dog.
For those of you who don't know, that's Sarah's significant other, none
Yeah.
other than the Ken Siegel.
Well,
He's my significant other, so you gotta.
And he's supposed to be at a meeting right now, but I'll let that go. Okay, so wanted to have a discussion about just very briefly about any updates on your thoughts about climate resiliency, sustainability as it relates to the COVID-19 issue and more recently the social justice issue. And I guess so the floor is open for any thoughts. And I'll have some comments at the end. So we'll start at the bottom. Sarah, any thoughts?
oh, I don't know how I feel about being at the bottom. Top in my world. Anyway, but anyway, be that as it may, I mean, I think it's a fascinating and opportune time, right? Because both, you know, I mean, not that it's positive that there have been health inequities with COVID, but there are certainly massive learnings about health risks related to it. And I've talked to Victor about he and I should sit down with Kelly Magnuson again and say, you know, you had a plan to address some of the risks of climate change and whatnot. What have you learned from COVID that would now enable you to rewrite or rethink about some of the things you would do?
The person from Ledgelate that we met with?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep. And then, you know, probably also the fire chief, because if you think about now logistically trying to do, you know, eventually COVID vaccinations, that's a huge challenge. And the same would be true for some of the health issues that you would encounter with climate change. I also think that it certainly has brought to a head the inequities in our healthcare system, and that minorities and the general theme of, you know, inequity and bias that occurs. And that is going to be true for both COVID and the climate change as well. I think California has been in the news pretty prominently, and over the summer with the fires in particular, and that has been linked to climate change directly from what I've seen. So, and then Zell, I mentioned to you, this is sort of a non sequitur, but I noticed in the patch, then I don't know how many of you read that, but they just started in the real estate sections doing a FEMA flood rating of properties in our area.
Wow.
Yeah,
No,
and it's really interesting because there's like a condo for sale in Mystic that's got, so like Frank, your neighborhood and my neighborhood are a 1 out of 10 risk, right? But there's a condo in Mystic that's 4 out of 10. There's something in Stonington that's a 9 out of 10 flood risk.
Wow.
So figured very prominently in it. And I thought, you know, fascinating that people are, that's going to start the dialogue for people. So that's kind of my random number thought generator thing that doesn't really answer your question.
But that is what's
But there
happening.
you go.
Yeah, that's what's happening in terms of flood insurance and everything else. It finally.
Exactly. And it's good, even if someone doesn't understand and they're looking at a house, they don't understand what that is, they're going to ask about it, because they're going to see that the different houses they're looking at have different numbers associated with it.
Yep.
So, yeah, I thought that was really interesting.
Jesse, do you want to follow on any thoughts you might have?
In terms of building, I mean, is this what we're doing in terms of our?
Oh, in terms of the relationship between what we're doing and the pandemic.
Oh, I don't think much of mine has to do with the pandemic, because I think the risks in terms of building and all of that kind of thing are there regardless. So most of what I have focused on is building codes and what we can do for that, and going back to your plan from 2011 and saying, what should the town do? So in terms of pandemic, I'm not sure that I have much to add.
Okay. Frank?
I'm what the pandemic has shown us, and I think actually we've seen a little bit of recognition of this, is that the United States, and I'll leave it at the United States and not to our Connecticut in particular, as a society is very slow to plan. We had Bill Gates in 2015 talking about pandemics and the potential, because they had been working in some of the African situation, and the need for planning. And it was, I would say, completely ignored. Only the aficionados really heard what he had to say, and the Congress, if they did hear what they had to say, paid no attention to it. So if we take that as a lesson, and you use the words of the Westerly document, where you're talking about a climate crisis, and thinking of it in terms of a disease crisis, the pandemic, to what advantage could we use the COVID situation to encourage our government, our people, to embrace long-term planning?
Yep.
Really good point. Any discussion about that?
Yeah, I think it reminds me of the book you gave us to read about, then that conflict. I'm sure, Frank, you were thinking about that too when you made the comment, but I think it's a great point. I think without preparing, certainly the glaring examples of not preparing ahead have been there for the COVID crisis,
Right.
and the consequences of that. And so why not try it as a lever to increase long-term planning?
Yeah, and I think the current events of the last while, whether it's hurricanes or wildfires, have, they have increased the public's perception of what climate change is all about and what we can anticipate. And so, fortunately, we don't have wildfires. We have not had storms, thank God, but we totally know we can. And so I think the public is way more attuned to the reality that climate change is having an impact on our lives. And we need to...
Sorry, Jesse, go ahead, finish.
We need to take advantage of that.
One of the things that when we were talking about long-term planning that I immediately thought of was some of the great stories around 9/11 and how prepared New York was for that. Not because they had prepared for that specific scenario, because who in the world would have, but they had prepared for similar scenarios. And they were similar enough that they knew how to respond to it and marshal resources, and they had a chain of command agreed to. And there's been a documentary around that. And so there was literally a book prepared, a crisis management book, and they pulled out the relevant section of the crisis management book. And again, I think to the point of, can you push this kind of planning? This would be a very helpful, couple of examples to point to as to why it's important.
And I don't know about you guys, but when I went through my recommendations for what we should be recommending, everything ends in funding. Everything ends in funding. And how do we, as a task force, try to address that issue? Because I think, I went to Zell's thing from 2011 and all the recommendations of that, and everything from hazard mitigation plans and everything. We don't have a lot. We have updates to recommendations, but we don't have new ideas as to how the hell you fund this stuff. And that's what it's out. And I thought when Zell sent out Westerly and those plans, they didn't address that directly either. They just said, you must address it. And I think the fundamental challenge of what we recommend to the town council is, how do you fund it? How do you fund what are the most critical things to do? And it's a leap forward of where communities have been.
Absolutely. Money's a big deal.
Yeah, I think it's
You could argue there's going to be a lot less of it.
Well-
Yeah, that's very likely after the COVID. I mean, government has spent, the federal government has spent millions, and the state doesn't have the revenue coming in. So there's no question there's going to be a money thing. But to go back to the comment early on, Sarah, the flood index, if you will, on the condo, that sort of thing begins to bring the dollar into the equation.
It does.
People thinking, how do we decrease, if you will, the index, make it less prone to flooding, make it less prone to flooding, make it less prone to flooding effects, access and the like, with some planning. And that might encourage the town council, which we have heard their main policy is, quote, the low cost bidder, or no expense at all. When asked about the road, I'm thinking of Public
Right.
Works telling us about raising roads. What
Yeah.
is the plan? There is no plan. There is a policy of don't spend any more of the taxpayers' money than possible.
You
I
guys,
said, well, there are times when you have to spend it. They're paving our road, or a road, and sort of thing.
plan?
So I think the fact that the monetary comes in, so many houses being lost in California, that's a real monetary hit. Might begin to soften up the block, the dam that is funding. And of course, we've talked about where you get monies and that position business. Sal and I talked about again the other day. Grants.
Yeah, I mean, I think I could be wrong, but assuming this election, we get a flip.
We hope.
Oh, you're right.
Okay, no, but assuming we do, it's pretty clear to me that the Congress is likely to have to provide funding to state and local communities because of the real damage that's been done to the economy.
Unemployment, right?
Pardon?
Because of unemployment.
Unemployment. And the way they've done that in the past, like in the last downturn, it was a shovel-ready infrastructure projects, and they shoveled money to local communities to figure out what to do, including climate change, because the town of Groton was funded $198,000 to start that process. And my guess is that that's going to happen again. It may not be in the exact same format, but it seems to me that on the platform has already been climate change, according to the Democrats. Certainly the COVID is, and that's there, and infrastructure is. So you've got these areas where potentially money may well come from, and my fear is that it may come way too fast, and we're not in a position to be able to accept it. I mean, in fact, as I was telling Frank the other day in a offline meeting, I mean, I've seen lots of notices of money available for grants, which we're unable to take advantage of. And this is in spite of the administration. What's happening down deep in the agencies under the radar scope is they're making grants available to local communities and states right now and research organizations. So it's out there. We just can't, we got to figure out a strategy to get it.
You know what we should be doing to do that, Phil?
What, pardon?
We should be doing to take advantage of that?
Well, it's very simple, I think, and I'll report on this later. We need to get the town set up so they can do that. And that really means getting a person on board who will do that.
It's having a person. Got it.
I mean, it's the old chicken and egg problem.
Yep.
We got to have someone who can sit there, write these grants, follow through, do all the, I mean, because anytime you get a grant, you got paperwork, you got to deal with all that nonsense.
Yeah.
You have to do it.
No, it's.
And you have to get some work done
Yep.
to boot. And there's no one seems to be capable of doing that right now in the town, or not being authorized to do it at any rate. Well, okay, let's get back to that, because there is a line here about what we need to do for next year. So how about we go to Mickey and see if you have any thoughts about the COVID climate relationship. Hi, Victor.
Hi, I apologize about being late. I'll tell you my brief excuse in a minute.
We're glad you're here.
We're glad you're here.
Thank you.
Mickey?
Well, clearly, I think that what has been lacking with COVID dramatically is the lack of fact-based decision-making by the administration. You know, the COVID, the administration is completely disregarding the expertise that's there in the CDC and the public health world. And so we've got to hope that, and I think there's a reasonable expectation that if Biden gets elected, we're going to have a more fact-based decision-making for COVID and for climate change. And, you know, it does seem like the polls show that majority of Americans, and I would imagine maybe even a larger majority of people here in Groton, because I think we're pretty fact-based community, recognize the need for dealing with climate change. A little bit of what you're saying in terms of getting a person to work on getting grants is a chicken and an egg kind of a situation. On the one hand, I'm not sure which is the chicken, which is the egg, but on the one hand, you know, maybe we need a grant to get the planner. So there's a salary for that person. But also I think that the other side of it is that you need maybe what we need is a plan that shows where funding might be needed. Because I think that just to say, well, we need funding, you know, for what? And so, you know, maybe that's our job to have specific ideas about what the funds would be used for. And that could be used to motivate the politicians here in town to be supportive of getting the planner. So, so it is a bit of a chicken and egg kind of a deal there.
I think your point's well taken on that, Mickey. And I have thought about that quite a bit. I've not seen any money available for hiring the planner to do that. But so I think maybe we're going to have to, in some way, do that with or through the town council. And that's going to take some time. I mean, they have been, if you've been watching anything what's going on in the town this last summer, it is unbelievable in terms of their nickel and diming things and micromanaging stuff that really ought to be left to staff level. So we've got a challenge ahead of us with this particular council.
So I noticed that in the material you sent to us from Westerly,
Yes.
that was put together by something.com.
Yeah, it's basically TNC, an offshoot of TNC.
Right. So they have kind of a maybe a cookie cutter type of an approach. You basically follow a process that they have laid out, that the end up result is a plan. I you know, there's quite a bit of detail in that plan. And I don't know what TNC, or again, I can't remember the name of the outfit that they brand themselves by something else.
They brand themselves as the Community Resilience Building.org.
Yeah, that. So it was you know, from what I gathered, from what I read, was that they got people in the community to give input, and basically they plugged in the specifics for that community into what seems like probably a outline that is their standard outline.
What I'm going to do to follow up on your point, Mickey, is I'm going to actually call Westerly and find out how they did fund that, because first of all, TNC at some point doesn't work for free. Second of all, I suspect the state, I mean, there was in the budget in 2019 money for doing these plans, $1 million for the 5 communities that did it. So I got to find out how much of that actually went to Westerly. And then the Westerly's got, I mean, literally the entire staff working on this thing. At least that's what they have in their publication there. And I want to find out, so how did that get distributed? How did that, and what made people come to the table?
So could we back up and ask Frank?
Right.
Okay, TNC in Westerly versus TNC here, and what Circa has to contribute to this here, because I have the same, I think that you do, Frank, the same kind of like TNC. That's not really where I want to go. So what? And this has been a continual problem, and it continues to be. What is the resource that Circa can give us for our place as opposed to TNC in Westerly?
Yeah, and when I read it, Zell, what I saw was exactly the same framework that funded up the work that you did in 2010, 11, 12.
Yep.
It's the same structure where you had a facilitator, there was a grant, and you brought in community folks from a variety of segments, even academic, to make presentations, and they produced a document that if you look one to the other, it's about the same. I was not at all impressed with the Westerly document, mainly because I had a hunt. I finally found it, but I had a hunt for sea level change.
Yep, that's what I thought.
They talk about flooding, and they talk about the resilience of the beaches and the maintenance of the dunes and the rest, without any detailed discussion, and the detail only has to be a paragraph, of what does it mean if you put 18 inches on all this? Misquamicut is going to move across Shore Road. The beach just sure as hell. What is all that going to mean to you? So there's two things. The framework that they use is exactly the same one we used back when, and I don't think it adds an awful lot to the discussion today. Having a series of bullets of what you ought to do is one thing. How you do it is another.
Yep.
I agree.
Yep. And so that was very frustrating. Thank you, Frank. That's what I needed to hear, because I'm going like, this is not reality. Hello.
Well, I want to find out the mechanisms on the money side. I mean, we're not in the state of Rhode Island. We are in the state of Connecticut, and as far as I can tell, there is no money available from the state of Connecticut to do any of this sort of work. I mean, they're muddling along at the state level, and these various work groups they've got, but there's no money. And I asked Rebecca just yesterday, two days ago, when that was happening, so what's the requirement for local communities? And basically the answer is, you got to plan for 20 inches of sea level by 2050, period. That's it.
Well, I didn't know the context of her response, but of course she's a alumni of Circa.
I know.
And the Circa grant process, mainly, my knowledge now, consider the source, has been HUD, and they're federal monies, and they were fairly big monies a year and a half ago, and that's what was funding up when we had our meeting with Circa about the Fairfield work.
Right.
That came out of that, and of course the way it works is HUD gives the money to the state, and it becomes therefore state money that comes to the towns and the rest. But it's really the federal money just passed through.
No, and it's all west of New Haven. All
Right, west of it.
Money is west of New Haven.
Right. So it's worth, I think it would be worth finding out where Rhodey is getting their money and passing it to the towns. But it's also, I think, again, timed to bring us up to date on what Circa's up to, where they're writing grants, if they're writing grants right now. I know they are.
Yeah.
We got that email, but I don't think there are new, I mean, the money for the grants was the HUD grant.
Right.
Money grants to towns. So it's hard. Money is hard, and that's why we've always focused on the need for a grant writer, because there is money out there. We don't have the capacity as a task force to go find it, but there is money. And when you look at Westerly and you look at other places, they have accessed money, even for things that we might think were not worth accessing money for, but there is money out there.
Yeah, on that, okay, so let's leave it there. And let me finish with Victor. Do you have any thoughts about the, and I know you missed part of this, but the question was asked was, it was really item 5A, a discussion update on the relationship between the climate issue that we're faced with and the COVID-19. Do you have any quick thoughts that you want to share with us?
Well, I at the risk of, I would be most likely repetitious of what some of you have already mentioned. But other than to say that COVID-19 and particularly the devastating western part of the country, forest fires, just make a statement that this is not planning for the future. This is at worst planning for the past, an oxymoron, or coping with the present. And but I think we've had ample discussions about what is really telling us. I think this is going to end up being a decision at every stage of the game, comparing and contrasting the value of the investment in terms of resilience and sustainability, and the harms for doing anything else other than what we would propose in the different chapters.
Any comments?
And the other point that I made in earlier meetings is, to me, I think the number one root problem for us and the challenge is the tremendous polarization and the lack of social cohesion. Because even though if we elect somebody else other than somebody who is adding fuel to the fire, the polarization is still being promoted, and it's out there, and the media makes money. Well, I have lots of concerns about that, and I just don't have a bright idea about how to resolve that problem.
I gotta call you back.
Any comments?
Well, I gotta call you back.
Any other comments?
No, I thought, Zell, I thought we were going to try tonight to share sort of preliminary comments about recommendations and stuff in different sectors. Am I jumping the gun?
Jumping the head.
Okay. Sorry.
The agenda. Okay, so my thought is, and I'll be very brief about it. We've already talked a lot about this thing. What's clear to me is that what the pandemic has shown is that while the federal government may have failed miserably through CDC and a whole bunch of decisions that are made in Washington, what has happened is that those people who chose to make decisions science-based, and I'm thinking particularly of the governor of New York, the governor of New Jersey, and the governor of Connecticut, they've actually made a difference in what's happened to the pandemic in their three respective states. And so I see there's a lot of hope that when push comes to shove, we really can make changes if it's necessary. So I want to leave it like that, say that I think it's clearly demonstrated that you can make a difference. And so I'm optimistic about going forward. Okay.
Because it's hard to be optimistic right now in this world.
Well, I agree, but that's where I am at. So, okay, so let's have any further comments about that, or think I'm dead wrong. Let's move on to discussion of our respective topics. And I'd like to keep this really brief so that everybody can get a chance to do it. And I know, because I've talked to you all, that except Mickey, I did not talk to you, and you may be the surprise here, but I know everybody's been thinking about it. Some people have been outlining it, but no one's actually gone to the work of sort of putting it all together. So where do you want me to start? Who on which square do we go to first? Okay, Jesse.
Good call.
Okay. All right. So my sort of thoughts. Oh, I'm mute. What am I doing?
No, you're fine.
I hear you.
All right. So my focus has been on existing infrastructure buildings primarily, and trying to think about things that we could recommend to the town that they would do. And I loved Westerly's thing, Zell, that sort of said no new building in floodplains, because I happen to live on one and I have 2 houses in front of me that I don't want to change, but that's very personal. But I think the building code thing is an enormous recommendation that we can make. So there is this organization, the Home Builders Association, IBHS, that has a fortified home requirement, and that sets standards for homes in places like Groton, Long Point, or Front Street, or whatever else that would lead us to, I think, at the ultra thing, to say no new construction, which is what Westerly has done. And I was really excited to see Westerly say that, no new construction, because most people would say, oh, you got to deal with floodplain levels and everything. But as we in our public campaign of information make people available in Groton, Long Point, Front Street, downtown Mystic,
Jupiter Point.
of how, Jupiter Point, how at risk they are, we should be parlaying that. So back to Frank's proposal when he went to a workshop, which I wholeheartedly support. We, as the town of Groton, should engage in the community rating system of FEMA. And we are sort of on it, but we are like at a 10, which is nothing. We have 3 communities in Connecticut that have gotten down to a 7, which significantly reduces the flood insurance premiums for those properties. And there is nothing in that process that is a negative to the town. It's just like, okay, you do these things. And one of the first and foremost is to actually do, and this is to you, Frank, an accurate assessment of flood levels of structures in the state. So you saw what I sent out a while ago about, I mean, we've got circas and then this other thing, which I can't remember right now, but about what are the flood levels here? Is that something you can look into?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. And it's a question that comes immediately to mind when you talk about no new building in an area, how you define the area.
Yeah.
Because they have areas defined now. Do we define it on the basis of 2050? Or do we say we'll go out 15 years, sort of a thing?
Yeah, no, and I think that's a really critical thing, because we all know the tax revenue from these properties is enormous. But do we want as a town to take on the the tax burden of dealing with these properties in a storm? So I think if you could, Frank, look at that thing I sent out about 3 weeks ago or something in terms of what circus is. Are we on the same page as what the what the
flood line is?
You know, Jesse, did I see somewhere that there was, I thought we had all been talking about 30 inches by 20
20 inches,
20 inches by,
inches
18, right.
by 2030.
50, 2050,
2050.
by 2050.
Because recently I saw something that looked like 18 inches by 20.
Well, it depends what happens to this Arctic ice shelf, quite frankly.
well, I mean, I've been looking at this quite carefully, and it turns out, I mean, Rebecca used 2 feet just on Monday. And I'm thinking, where the hell did she get 2 feet?
Yeah, no.
So the numbers are being thrown around, and it's not particularly useful to have, but I mean,
So Rebecca from former Circa, now HUD.
Right.
Connecticut.
Rebecca Fringe.
Yeah, okay. So she's using 2 feet? Wow.
so
No.
you're gonna have to find out about that, because I don't think that's right. Because I think the statute's pretty clear. It's 20 inches, 18 inches by,
The statute is clear. Rebecca French for DOH in terms of what they are planning for is something different. That's not ruled by the statute. That is DOH.
okay, I need to talk to you about that more, and I will. Anything else, Jesse? Can I follow on with something because I've also got a responsibility to look at some of the stuff with Jesse. And over the summer, I had the good fortune to talk to a fellow from California who's on their town council in Silicon Valley. And boy, have they upped their building code big time. I mean, they basically said no new houses that are, and this goes outside the flood area, but no new houses that can be built that are not fully electric. Well, you'd say, well, why is that? Because California is going to try to get to zero or net zero energy, and they don't want people having gas grills and gas stoves. And I told Frank about this thing, but they're actually trying to make this thing stick. So there are a bunch of things in the building code that could be dealt with. Also, I noticed that there are some moves to make these houses well insulated. So there's no question about, you don't need a lot of air conditioning or a lot of heating systems to keep these places at a human standard. So I think there's a lot to be done there. We're going to get a huge amount of pushback, though. Okay, Frank.
Yeah, and I just looked at Rebecca's email, and she talks about 0.5 of a meter. And she says that's 1 foot 8 inches, higher than the national tidal datum in Long Island Sound by 2050. So we've been using 18 inches, but it sounds like 20 there. Well, we've been looking at a number of things, mainly associated with coastal factors, and sea level is figured prominently in those discussions, in that search. Trying to lay out the boundaries around the town, trying and using for the most part, I'm using the Circa flood maps that I think you've seen before. If you haven't, we can send you the link for that. With one of the things I've been trying to draw in is road elevations around the town, on the one hand, coastal erosion potential, which is relatively limited. Now, mind you, I'm talking about the town, the whole of the town. So we're thinking about Groton as a whole, including the city of Groton.
Good.
So Bluff Point in that area gets into the discussion. Impacts on tidal wetlands, what it might mean in terms of renourishment and migration. You saw some mention of that in the Westerly document. Westerly, of course, is a little more sensitive than we are to that whole thing because of the Barrier Beach situation. And trying to bring this into a framework that can be used for action. And I think of those bullets, the primary one is roadway. We got plenty of roads that currently flood fairly regularly. And we have heard in the past that the town doesn't have any plan for raising the roads. So I'd like to use that as sort of the low-hanging fruit, if you will. in a document that we would put together that would have the form, more or less, of the Westerly document. That is a series of bullets. Nothing is long. We might consider priorities, pick one as the most important and the other is less important, to be brought to the town council. I'm suggesting that we should have a meeting with the town council within the next few months with this 1 or 2 page document with a number of these bullets on it, along with actions associated with each of the bullets, to see how that whole list or concepts of planning and action is received by the council. Give us an idea of the nature of the enemy, if you will. Hopefully they're not enemy. We're in a collaborative exercise here, but there are a lot of reasons to believe that there's at least some faction on the council that wants to go negative no matter what you tell them. So I think getting to them sooner than later would provide us with a foundation for moving ahead for the full written document. That's sort of in a nutshell what I've been doing. I've been working around the coast, looking at flood potential, erosion potential, and what sea level might mean in the management of those areas. I think prominent figured in that is the issue that Jess mentioned on the building in the floodplain, how the town would handle if Victoria Beach and Groton Long Point really was basically destroyed in a storm. Are we allowing rebuilding? And if not, who's paying the bill? Do we have a and the other thing in all of this, I'm not thinking in terms of 5 years. I'm thinking in terms of 30 years. And so it's a matter of beginning the exercise and building some of the resources, the bank account that you might need to handle some of these situations, so that you don't have to wait till it happens to build masks. Speaking of our friend COVID-19. That's it, in a nutshell.
Any questions for Frank?
So, Frank, I have just a question. So when you're talking about, how many areas and of what size do you identify as the key areas then in our area?
Yeah, there's areas in Noack.
Yeah.
None of it is 5 square miles. It's all less
There's
than a
sort of
mile.
patches here and there,
Yeah,
right?
it's a patchwork quilt. When you get up there's Granite Street and the like in downtown Mystic, Jupiter Point. You can go on right around the town. Groton Long Point, depending on the storm you're playing with. It's a funny thing, for all we heard from our social justice folks, Pequannock Plain didn't look to be much of a problem at all.
Yeah.
From the flooding standpoint.
Other comments? You see, I think that's manageable, because that basically puts us in the ballgame of 5 or 6 areas that we really need to focus on, and I think that's important.
And they have, as evidenced by all the stirring our first meeting about the bridge, a fair amount of political clout over there on the point. So when you come in and tell them if the house falls down, you're not going to rebuild, you'll get a pretty good feeling for the response to the suggestion.
Well, but I think there's 2 issues. There's a bunch of issues. One is, if you got a piece of land and you want to build a new house, I think Jesse would say no. If you got a house that you got there already and you want to rebuild it, then it depends upon how much you're going to rebuild and whether you should allow it and under what circumstances.
Raising it up or
I have
whatever.
a lot of thoughts on that. But how about when we talk about, I think the next step actually is our public education campaign.
Ah, yes.
And I think that was one of the most important things about what Westerly did, is we need to start communicating with Groton, Long Point, Jupiter Point, Front Street, and Noack, and say, hey, this is what we know about what is anticipated. What do you think we should do?
That's the forgotten, we had talked about that early on in a big way, being very much in favor of education. And now it might be a matter of care and how we approach it, realizing what we're dealing with in the council. Should we meet with the council before we initiate? Or should we initiate and then go to the council? But it should be initiated.
I think we should talk to the council, Frank, and say, this is our, this is what we think we should do. Do you have any problem with it?
That's that one page, exactly.
Yeah, okay. Now, having actually run this thing in the last go around, this is a hell of a lot of work for a couple of us to make that actually happen. And it's doubly difficult with this bloody virus, because you can't just have a meeting at the firehouse or a meeting at the, where you just invite people to come. And even if you make all the phone calls, you can't do it. You got to have everybody on Zoom today. So, I mean, we got to figure out carefully how we want to try to do that. And you can't go into it without having a written document and or some maps to show people just what we're talking about. Because they'll read something and they don't think it applies to them. If you have a map which shows their house and where the line is and how high it is or how low it is, then it has an effect. So
Zell,
that
all we can do is provide the information. So as a task force, we can say, this is the information. This, if you want to find out where you are, I mean, we don't have, we don't have a requirement to educate everybody. We have a requirement to provide the information.
But I think he's saying that even that now with the constraints, it's difficult to provide.
Of course it is.
Wow.
It's,
I mean,
just,
that's just a fact.
it's a pain. It's
Yeah.
a little pain.
Yeah.
But we have to try.
Well, I agree about that.
We can't be castigated for not having done it.
Does the council meet in person?
No.
No, nobody does, Mickey.
Nobody.
We don't, any of us do.
And that's a real problem. And you see it in the council and actually in you know, in very stark terms. I mean, they're not communicating among themselves. You see it in the way the council meetings are running.
And among us too, right?
Well, that's right. I'm going to change that somehow. I'm not sure how, but I'm looking. Okay. Well,
We should all wear scuba gear.
Oh, okay. That's pretty protective.
we'll have an underwater meeting. No.
There you go.
Okay. So let me move on to Sarah. Do you and Victor want to share what you've got? How you guys do that together?
Sure. Sarah, I can say a little bit about what you've done, and you can say about what I have done or not done. So Sarah and I had firm plans and intent of putting more concrete recommendations in writing by the month of September, which we're in the middle of. And so Sarah put together a very nice outline for healthcare and emergency preparedness section and she sent that to me. It outlined 4 very broad strategies, some specific, and I'll tell you what they are in a second, a couple of objectives, and then some of the salient sources of recommendations and research that addresses human health and climate change. And then in addition to that, we've been in our separate ways continuing to gather information. And Zell, thank you very much for sending the circa announcement on the series of webinars specifically devoted to climate change and public health. I've attended most of those sessions, And with regards to public education, they did not show how many attendees there were in these webinars because it was not like a panel of everybody attending.
No,
But I was the only one who I could see myself attending. I don't know if anybody else was, but there were a couple of questions that suggested that somebody else, in addition to myself, was on the. So Jesse and Frank, with regards to the need for public education, I think as a task force, that is completely logical. I'm just trying to figure out if the amount of effort that will take, and if this Circa series, which was extremely well put together, and some really super qualified people, I don't know that we will take the process much further. And if the goal of public education, I'm thinking there would be several things, and I'm still talking about human health as a particular, is to simply have a town conversation about it and inform people. Number two is to make it part of our process so that we can rightfully say that we have done our research and we have sought public input is the second. And the third is to actually get some ideas of things that we have not read, thought, or deliberated about up until now, which I would be somewhat skeptical. But I don't rule it out. We have, I think, just about everything we need to put something in writing. And I know what I need is time. And Sarah, I suspect between COVID and personal issues and other obligations, we are both sort of struggling with finding time to put our thoughts to paper.
Yeah, I'm well said. So I think that one thing that I would advocate for is that maybe as a task force, we first start by sharing outlines.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, at least try to go at it that way. I mean, you know, frankly, what happened is we started off some work, and then what Victor's referring to is my mother is very ill. And actually we leave tomorrow to go to Minnesota because Minnesota has opened up the nursing home for an indoor visit. And so we're driving out, and we'll go visit her and then come drive back next week. So time has been really tough this summer. So we kind of, at least from my point of view, and Victor, I think you've continued to plug along with it, at least lately, a lot more than I have. I had time at the start of the summer, got to the outline, had some good overall views of themes and key themes that would be present in this. And then frankly, I've set it aside. I have not had the ability to look at it.
And let me add something, Sarah, that I haven't had a chance to comment to you, but I'm actually, the climate change is actually robbing me of additional time to sit down and write. My son and daughter-in-law and their 2.5-month-old baby are what I call climate change refugees. Mm-hmm. They were living in, they have their home in Oakland, California, and the air quality conditions were so severe and so bad, and they don't have air conditioning, the extreme heat, the air quality, and we strongly encourage them to come east. So they're living with us.
Yeah.
So if you can think of climate change as a present problem that is hampering our personal efforts to find a solution or a way to get this started, here is a living example. And on top of that, I have 2 other daughters who are COVID-19 refugees, not living where they normally live in New York City. So it's just amazing how this thing, it's like, I feel like the proverbial frog in the boiler, you know.
Frying pan.
Yep, lots going on. Lots.
Lots going on. Yeah.
Any other comments?
I like the idea of sharing outlines.
I like that idea too. Mickey, let's turn to you. You had volunteered to look at recycling, sort of the end of life processes for materials and energy.
Right. So I have been looking at it in terms of more national or regional issues related to things like plastics and contaminants of emerging concern. What I could certainly use your help on, or go to maybe some local sources to see how that really impacts locally. My topic is really the only one that is not kind of climate change driven. Maybe there are links, but it's mostly driven by issues related to how waste management and the people's behavior with what they do with materials. But certainly in terms of COVID, one of the things that we've noticed is an awful lot of PPE detritus around. I'm not sure that's really you see the masks are everywhere. As if you look on the street and the beach and in the water, a lot of masks floating around. But anyway, I at this point, I don't really have much to contribute. From a local point of view, what now, if we expect people here in Groton to to follow certain, things like, reducing their use of plastic, or, one thing I would love to see happen would be that all this packaging that is in both in our supermarkets and in terms of the packaging that comes with stuff now via UPS. I don't see the need for it, and I think it's just adding an awful lot of waste to the waste stream. And so people in Groton, might have to get used to different ways of expecting their stuff to show up, or to, or the shopkeepers to package their material in a more ecologically sensitive way. So it's not quite the same kind of thing as what you're talking about, where there's a force that's impinging on people that they're going to have to respond to. This one be more responding to, the understanding about what happens if we don't do better with our waste management.
Well, Mickey, the thought that I had, you were saying you didn't think there was a way of doing this locally. Let me suggest that.
Hey, Zell. Zell, hang on a second. Jesse, are you okay?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, okay. Are you just tired, or?
No, I thought we had ended it actually. So anyway, I'm fine.
Okay.
So the hook, I think, is there, is how does all this recycling and materials use end up affecting our use of energy, and how much of that is oil-based, the product itself, how much of that can be generated from other non-oil-based products, and looking at the energy budget is actually very important, because my guess is that we are way underpricing what the reality is. I mean, I see those damn big garbage trucks going around here, and I'm thinking, man, we're burning up some hydrocarbons in those big puppies. So I don't know whether you can look at it from that point of view, but that's one way of doing it.
That's a subject here now that we've, a bunch of us seem to have gone over. How the town should be contributing to the reduction of their carbon footprint in the interest of reducing climate change.
Right.
How are we addressing that? We gonna lay that all on Mick?
No. I mean, that's something that I'm working on.
Okay.
Clearly. It's this Middletown proposal that I sent to you is one way of doing it, with calling out a climate crisis. I'm not sure it's exactly the right way to do it. But if we don't fundamentally deal with how do we reduce our carbon footprint, this is going to not be a useful exercise. I mean, you got to do that. I mean, yeah, we got to deal with resiliency and sustainability, but if you don't deal with the fundamental issue of what do we do about mitigating and adapting around this CO2 issue, part of what my train proposal is to try to reduce the amount of greenhouse gases that comes into that we generate in this town from the use of our automobiles. How do we get it more electric? How do we get more mass transit? All of which are going to be very challenging with the COVID thing.
You know, in some of these circa webinars that I refer to, I noticed several slides from a place called Climate Central.
Yes.
And it is an extraordinary locus for resources, data, visuals, videos, both educational and for presentation and for just plain educational purposes. And I encourage everybody to Google it and take a look at it. climatecentral.com or .org, and there are some potentially very useful specifics. I'm thinking about if we're going to come up with specific recommendations. For example, if a hurricane destroys a property, can you rebuild it in Groton Long Point? Or if you are allowed to de novo build on a floodplain, considering the 20 inches projection. Because at the end of the day, it's beginning to sound to me that we will need to have like almost like a generic decision tree that will say, does this investment, town investment, or even private building permit addresses these particular very specific recommendations, and the do's and don'ts are going to contain the net effect of greater benefit and lesser impact in the mid and long term. But without a somewhat specific roadmap for each one of these chapters, if we just come up with generalities, I'm not sure. It's going to sound a little bit like the Middletown emergency, which is very laudable, but no specifics.
Right. We want to avoid that, absolutely.
Yeah. So that will take a lot more work, and try not to micromanage the future, because nobody can, but at least some general concepts that exemplify a climate change sensitive investment or action, regulation, etc. So that's going to be somewhat longer document.
Okay, well,
Just while we're talking about the circa, just a couple of things. Tomorrow is the last of the sessions. It's tomorrow at 3, and they still have space or whatever.
Yep.
And the other thing is that you can see the old ones, the previous ones on YouTube. There's a link on their website to go to the previous ones.
Okay, the next item we had here is next steps and timing of activities for the task force. Let me start by simply being pretty short about this. I'm of the opinion that, and I had checked with the town mayor about this, suggested that we not do a whole lot in terms of any kind of written material to the town council until after the election. Because I think it's going to really be important that we understand sort of where the national picture is. That's the first thing. And she tends to agree with me, particularly the way, in light of the way the council sort of acted all summer long, where they were no in the weeds on all kinds of micromanaging of issues. And so I think that's probably probably good. I would like to suggest that what we need to do is our next activity should be, in fact, to share. Everybody needs to share with each other, and maybe we should agree that over the next 2 weeks you prepare something that you think is a good outline, and feel free to use something like the kind of information that's in the Westerly report as a way of sort of summarizing your information, and just share it among ourselves to see what we get. So we can have a real conversation at the next meeting about the outlines, because that will then begin to make, put us in a position of having something to really fill in. Any comments about that?
I think it's a good idea. I would emphasize, rather than the outline of the final report, that the outline consider priority item to bullets that we might want to get on this one page to the council.
Okay. Any other comments about that?
I also think it should be considered a working session. I mean, realistically, given what many of us have going on right now, I think, it's not going to be a complete document, and it'll benefit from the brainstorming of the rest of the group.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I also think we should then think about how we knit this all together, and whether you're going to pick a framework like the Westerly framework or whatever. But I mean, ultimately, all these pieces and parts of the puzzle need to come together and look uniform and be kind of cohesive. Or ideally, they would.
Mhm.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay. So.
Okay, sensible plan to me.
So this would lead to then the next topic, which is, I would like, and I bring it up tonight just simply to have you think about it. I'm particularly frustrated with not having anybody to help with from the town with this whole effort. At least during the last session we had someone who sort of helped off and on, and that was actually quite useful. And there was no prohibition about not having resources. In fact, we were able to get resources from time to time. So I would like you all to think about what it is you would like to have, and think about how conservative everybody's operating these days. What do you think we need to have in terms of resources from the town next fiscal year? That budget is going to start to be put together in November. And so if we have that conversation in October, we'll be in a much better position to really have something that's positive. Now, I don't think, I caution everybody to think about this as, what do you think is the minimum we really would have to find to be useful, as opposed to what the maximum might be? I mean, having $1 million would be cool. What the hell do we do with it? And how are we going to manage that?
Yeah, I don't think that the place to start is to say, well, exactly what we want this person to do and by when. And then we can think whether we need $1 million or $50,000 or whatever. I wanted to just ask everybody if what is a realistic estimate of the availability of grant funding to support something like what we're doing? And the second is, can we talk to the town and propose a contingency plan that they agreed to fund or guarantee funding for an amount that we need to estimate. And I don't know if grants if we can bring grant monies and essentially repay the town, reimburse the town for the, is that something in the public sphere is a no-no, or? Because there's a lot of what we call pre-sale investment here.
That typically is frowned upon. But
Yeah, you might refer to it as robbing Peter to pay Paul.
yeah,
Well, it's not robbing anybody. It's essentially
No.
like lawyers will give you a contingency plan. We're going to litigate this, and my fees are on a contingency that if we win, I get paid, or if we don't, then we don't. So it is, in other circles, it's not frowned upon, it's a common practice.
I'm not sure I understand what you're talking about then.
Well, it's if there is a realistic probability, high probability that we can get a, let's say, come up with a hypothetical number, $100,000, $150,000 to fund not only a grant writer, but somebody who will do some of the administrative work, including writing our report. Then we need it for this funding cycle that is starting in November, for this budget cycle that was starting in November.
well, actually, the budget process starts in November.
Right.
This is for the budget that actually would start July 1st, 2021.
Yeah.
But that's how far we have to get in advance ahead of this power curve.
Yeah. Yeah. The alternative is to find a volunteer to help us write a grant. But I don't know where that money is going to come from otherwise.
Okay, well, so think about this for next time. Let's leave it like that. Now I want to update you on what happened with remember we had the conversation last time about the town was unwilling to spring for a person to be the director of climate resiliency and sustainability in the town at the town council level, and they basically said, well, why don't you talk with the city and see if the city would be willing to pony up that. The initial reaction from the city was, through John Burt, was, yeah, we'd be interested in that. Then the virus hit, and essentially the conversation has gone nowheres, and essentially the conversation with the mayor is that it's off the table now. So I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon, and I think the mayor's position is, at this point, we'll have to do it ourselves in the town, and so that's where we need to go back to. So that was sort of a false start, not surprising considering what's happened over the years with the town and the city. So that sort of updates you on that. The other update that I wanted to give you, which I think you all saw a copy of, is that the letter we sent to the Conservation Commission on the open space plan. And they said, thank you very much. That looks like a policy document. We're not going to touch it. So they didn't. So they haven't responded in any way. And you recall that one of the things they said in there was, it would be okay to build in the floodplains, or we don't have to purchase floodplains or any of that sort of stuff. And it just didn't make any sense. And so I don't think we've got a particularly strong relationship there. And I'm not sure, I mean, their open space plan is nothing more than a long collection of lists of things that should happen, might happen. And if you tried to put it together as a plan, no one would read it. I don't think anybody's going to read it. It was almost 100 pages long. And so that sort of just didn't go anywhere. And then my other thought was any up-to-date of recent meetings anyone's had that they think they should share with the rest of the group. Anybody had anything they want to share or not?
Well,
Frank?
No,
No.
I just happen to think about Jess. Maybe somebody ought to call her.
Yeah, something's not right there.
Something's not right there.
Something is not right.
Yeah, I can,
Let me call.
you can call.
I'm going to mute myself. Go ahead and talk, and I will be right back to you.
Yeah, I
I
can
think that
go.
what I meant by robbing Peter to pay Paul
Yeah,
in the soft money world is I got a grant to put a buoy out. And in the course of putting the buoy out, I might be doing all sorts of sediment sampling along the way as I go out to put the buoy out. And I use those data to structure the next proposal,
right.
sort of a thing.
Yeah.
I'm not being paid to do it, and it's really improper use of the dollars you gave me for putting the buoy out to have this guy out there driving around doing his sampling. But it's not uncommon practice. And you think about how we might structure it here. If we got, for example, somebody like Deb Jones to work with us, she's being paid by the town, and she's working with us to do this, that, or the other thing with our task force report. And in the meantime that she's doing that, she's not really being paid to work with us to do it. That there's a grant being written to bring some money in.
Yeah.
Or use what's being produced that way to get a grant going. So it wasn't, robbing wasn't a pejorative. It was just a.
No, I understand what you're saying, and I totally agree. We all operate.
You shuffle the money around. Say.
Yeah, in the soft money world, that's.
Because the other thing we have to realize, and I'll say it again, what I said earlier, is that we're looking at the longer term. It's nice, and I think we want to encourage the council to do that and take some action that'll contribute to the longer term. And in the longer term, when you and I are gone out of this, they're going to need somebody like this soul that we're talking about in grant writing and management of the climate resiliency effort.
Yeah, I'm into that. I agree.
Okay, I just wanted to update you. I just talked to Jessie. She does sound fine. She just had to get into doing food stuff, so she's fine.
Okay.
Okay, good.
So I just wanted to let you all know.
Good, thanks.
Well,
Thanks for checking, Zal.
I would just mention that I participated in the joint Citizen Advisory Committee and Scientific and Technical Advisory Committee meetings for the Long Island Sound regional study a couple of weeks ago. And the topic of the joint meeting was to look at access to Long Island Sound. And part of that, and both from a scientific point of view, that's why the two committees met, as well as from the kind of the social side of it, societal side of it. It was I thought it was quite a productive meeting. Among other things, what we looked at was talked about was, environmental justice, so to speak, who has access to the Long Island Sound. But in any case, with rising sea level, there are opportunities for increasing access, because as perhaps property goes from being developable property to intertidal zone, these could be places of access to folks. Anyway, it was a good conference, and
yeah, there's been a fair amount. I mean, over the years, the public access issue has been certainly on the table, and you see any number of properties that have little flag signs, pointing, because they're required. It's like giving 5 or 10%, whatever it is, of a major development for open space or environmental space to provide some access to the waterfront.
And that actually was one of the things that Dave Kozak and I had a back and forth on. Dave is the person in the Connecticut DEP who is in charge of maintaining a directory to public access to Long Island Sound.
Right, they published a book, right?
And that includes things like what Frank was just talking about, which is when a property is developed, they often are required to allow a certain chunk of the property to provide access to the water. Unfortunately, what happens is those little chunks get, grown over. The sign that says coastal management, da 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 da, magically disappears. A new owner comes around, and people who might actually know that this is public access, the new owner says, "What the hell are you doing on my property?" And it's a little bit a challenge to convince them, well, no, this is actually not your property. So there's a whole bunch of issues related to maintaining the records for where these places are, and also the signage or whatever is necessary to allow the public, in fact, that they can use it. And then there's all sorts of mechanisms, of course, to avoid allowing people to use these places such as not having parking. So, you can go to Groton Long Point Beach as long as you walk there.
There have been in Groton a number of cases. Groton Long Point's one of them. The other one is in downtown Mystic. There was around the old trolley terminal. There was access that was required by a state permit, which never got recorded, and therefore it probably disappeared. But there was a lot of stink about that. And if you want to look up the history of that, there's a really interesting story there.
Actually, COVID is being used around the state now by municipalities to restrict people from going to their beach. They're saying, the beach is closed. It's only open to local people. You have to go into quarantine for 2 weeks before you can take a swim. That's an exaggeration. But anyway, so right now, this past summer, COVID has been a weapon that's been used by locals to keep the riffraff out.
Yeah, interesting.
Sarah or Victor? Okay, let me move on to the next item, and that was further discussion of the work plan. I think we've sort of worked that over pretty well at this point. I don't think we can do any more until we actually share the outlines that each of us have been assigned to do. Which brings us up, does anybody have any other old business they want to bring up at this point? And I'm trying to meet Frank's requirement of getting us out of here a half hour early at 6:30. And
Didn't realize it's my requirement, but I'll take credit for it.
Yeah, okay. Anybody have any other thoughts?
I would just say, Zell, that, one thing that I know I would appreciate at this point, and it sounds like several people have some just more complexity to life than what they thought they were going to have.
Always.
The pace of this, I'm going to try to keep up with it, but, I'm going to be gone the entire month of November in Minnesota cleaning out my mother's apartment. So there are just some pragmatic things where the pace for me, I'll try to work offline with Victor, but,
I got it.
The way it is.
Well, let me say, I know the whole bunch of us are all pretty well driven by getting things done on time.
Yeah.
This comes out of my mouth. I am not of the opinion that we should move fast.
Yeah.
We need to be very deliberate. I
like that we're moving to execution, because I think we've spent a long time doing the scholarship and I think we kind of know the big topic areas. It's a question now of just sort of getting it situated so it'll all fit together, and then working it through.
Don't feel discouraged and do what you can do.
Yeah.
And let's just move forward. But I think it's important for us to move this thing slowly through. Remember, who we're reporting to is the town council.
Right.
It's what we can do locally, not what's going to happen nationally. But what happens nationally is going to have a hell of an impact on us.
Yeah.
So,
Well, you're probably going to have the same town council, right? I mean,
well, not necessarily. The way they've been acting, a lot of those people aren't going to get reelected the way they're acting.
Hmm.
So be careful. Anyhow, Sarah, I was going to say, you got about 30 hours of driving. You're going to have this all right down, and you just tell Kenny he's got to have the Wi-Fi working the entire way to Minnesota.
that's right. That's right. Well,
Certainly,
yeah, hopefully I win on the radio stations.
and certainly we wish you the best for your mother.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
All
I
right.
second
Oh,
that.
well.
And
Well,
Yeah.
any
It's been
final
It's been
comment?
really one. She was living completely independently and then had a bad sepsis infection that has gone into her spine. And
Oh.
she's now bedridden and just, there are all kinds of issues. Don't know if she's going to pull through it or not. So it's been
I
a,
want to be there.
She is definitely a cool lady. I met her a year
she's
ago.
amazing.
A piece of work, man.
She
Terrific.
still has her sense of humor, which is great. I mean,
my
she's
God.
really funny to talk to. So,
Yeah. Great lady.
yeah. she is.
Anything else from anybody else? Well, Victor, you look like you need a nap.
Or
No,
a glass of wine.
A glass of wine, okay.
I took a nap and
Victor,
I haven't had any wine. I had tonic water and lime. There's a lime.
Well, thank you.
Victor, don't sign off just yet. I want to talk to you for a second.
Sure.
Okay, thank you all, and I will be in touch probably individually with each of you over the next couple of weeks. I guess the thought I had is that if we could get our drafts or our outlines in to each other by the 16th of October, that would be terrific. That would give us a week for people to actually look at them. Would that work for everybody?
Give it a try.
Yeah,
Okay.
we'll just go with what state it's in. So Victor, why don't you and I meet in about a week?
Sounds good. Just send me your availability, Sarah. And
Okay.
Okay.
I'll probably have.
Early October.
Frank,
Yep.
I was going to
Yep.
say, if you want to talk to Victor about things other than this.
No,
Okay.
I want to be, it's a matter of technical.
Okay. Well, the reason I say that is because it's all being recorded.
That's fine.
Okay. I just want to say. Well, anyhow, thank you all, and we'll be in touch. And Sarah, have a good trip
Thank you.
west.
Thank you. Yeah, go west.
Yes.
Thank you.
But come back east.
After the fires.
Yeah. Okay. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you all.
Bye, bye, everyone.
Victor, on several occasions now, I've noticed on some of these Zoom sessions, an interesting reflection, which is currently affecting your image here. If you put your hand over your head, I'm wondering, come towards the screen a little, or what do you have for a light? You've got you're segmented.
Oh, okay.
You see that?
Frank, it's just, I'm so saintly, I have a halo.
No, it's a halo, but I couldn't tell on the other ones.
Now, I have a light right over my head. Let me see if this fixes the problem. Hold on
No,
first.
it does not.
No, not yet. I don't have a way of turning the light over my head.
No, because I was wondering whether it's a camera issue. It's not the light, it's still there. You've got a bolt of lightning right down on your
Oh,
body.
yeah, I can see it's like a line. Let me
Yeah,
see.
right. And I was wondering, when I first saw that on
No,
No,
other,
it's it come directly from the light.
It's that LED light.
Well, I'm just finding another place.
okay. In any event, I was just
Yeah,
curious
yeah.
if we could find the cause of it. I didn't know whether
No,
it's a
I get
camera.
it.
Thank you. Have
Thanks
a
for
good evening,
pointing it out.
folks.
I can find another place. Oh, this is my office. I'll find another place that will be.
Yeah, it's not bad. It's just something that we said, well, how do you fix that? Have a
Yep.
good evening, folks.
Okay, you
you.
too,
Stay
Frank.
well.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Very well.
Bye-bye, Zell.
Bye-bye.
Bye.